Hare Krishna. My apologies for a little late. We can get started now. Thank you very much for coming for the Bhakti Shastri class. We have 3 more classes to go, 7, 8 and 9. So then we are done in terms of the content. So we'll start off with the Mangalacharan prayers as usual. Praying to Krishna so that we can understand his words, which are very mysterious and unfathomable. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroh Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhayascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Matsamo nasti papatma Naparadhi cha kaschana Parihare pilajjame Kimbruve purushottama. Bhumau skalitapadanam Bhumirevavalambanam Tvai jata paradhanam Tvameva sharanam prabho. Govinda vallabhe radhe Prarthaye tvamaham sada Tvadiyam iti janatu Govindo mam tvaya saha. Radha radhita radhesha Radhika prana vallabha Radha ramana vande tvam Radhika prema nirjita. Hare Krishna. So we are going to do the 7th chapter today and the first verse. Does anybody remember last week what was the last verse of the 6th chapter? It's the last verse of the 6th chapter was Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana Shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukto tamo mataha. In that, Krishna says, he gives the different paths of yoga system, and towards the end he says that of all the yogis, those who abide in me and those who serve with love and devotion and who are intimately united with me in yoga, those yogis I consider them to be the highest. So, but then which Krishna segued into bhakti. The first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita were on the path of karma, jnana and dhyana yogas. But from the chapter 7 through chapter 12, Krishna talks about bhakti and various stages of devotion onto him. when he has said that of all the yogis, those who serve me with love, they are the highest of all, then the next logical step would be, what is the relationship between God and the soul? Because that is not clearly defined yet. Krishna has given a hint onto himself. In the 5th chapter, 29th verse, he says, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam. And then he talks about himself in the 4th chapter also, when he was questioned that you spoke this knowledge to Sun God, but Sun God was born much, much earlier than you. So how did you actually speak this knowledge to him? And Krishna talks a little bit about his birth. Then he talks about his supremacy in the 5th chapter in the end. And the entire of 6th chapter was mainly on Dhyana Yoga. The 7th chapter, Krishna explicitly talks about himself and who is who is he and what is the relationship with the living entities. Kindly repeat after me. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Saktamana Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashrayah Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatagnasyasi Tat Shrinu. Mate, Vrinda.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt."
Thank you. So it's a beautiful purport. And the first words itself, Krishna is saying, Maya Sakta Manapartha. He's saying, with your mind attached to me. So the attachment of mind to Krishna is the ultimate process of bhakti. Mind is steeped in thoughts of Krishna. But to get to that point, Krishna says that there are some obstacles, and we will discuss what those obstacles are. We'll read a little bit of purport in the interest of time, because we have a sharp cutoff at 3. We'll read the second paragraph. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the living entity has been described as non-material spirit soul capable of elevating himself to self-realization by different types of yogas. At the end of the 6th chapter, it has been clearly stated that steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna, or in other words, Krishna consciousness, is the highest form of all yoga. By concentrating one's mind upon Krishna, one is able to know the absolute truth completely, but not otherwise. Impersonal Brahma Jyoti or localized Paramatma realization is not perfect knowledge of the absolute truth, because it's partial. Full and scientific knowledge is Krishna, and everything is revealed to the person in Krishna consciousness. So, the goal is that somehow to know Krishna or to get attached to Krishna is the goal of Bhakti Yoga. And Krishna is revealing that process as he goes along. And then it's a beautiful purport, please read it. And then Bhagavatam is also mentioned. Text 2. Kindly repeat after me. Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshyamase shatah yajñātvā neha bhūyonyāj jñātavyam avishishyate. Sneha Mataji, please read the translation. It's perfect timing. You're just grabbing the mic and...
I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know.
So here Krishna says, Jnanam tehamsa vijnanam. I have a question though. What was Krishna talking about all this time if he is going to reveal the Jnanam in this chapter? Right? Jnanam is knowledge. What did Krishna speak in the first 6 chapters then? If it was not knowledge. So, Srila Prabhupada actually, he says Jnanam in this context is something to know of this material world. Any knowledge related to the material world, Srila Prabhupada translates it as Jnanam, and all the other spiritual knowledge related to Krishna is called as Vijnanam. And if you see the purport. So Krishna says, I'll teach you the matter, what is matter, and I'll teach you what is spirit, and knowing which, nothing else or nothing remains to be known. And Srila Prabhupada actually, if you see the first line of the purport, complete knowledge includes knowledge of the phenomenal world, the spirit behind it, and the source of them both. Source of both of them. This is transcendental knowledge. So Krishna is saying Jnanam is the material world. Where is that material world coming from? Right? Text 3. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tattvataha. Lauren, please read the translation.
Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth.
Thank you. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that the perfection, the question one might ask is, what is perfection? Out of many thousands of men, hardly one endeavors for perfection. And amongst thousands of such men who have already attained perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Well, so what is the perfection that is Krishna is talking about? And why perfection seems, why quote unquote perfection is not a perfection? Because you don't know Krishna even after achieving the perfection. That's a mysterious thing that Krishna is saying in this. So the idea here is that even if you achieve the Brahman realization, or even if you achieve the Paramatma realization by perfection in Dhyana Yoga, or Siddhis, because if you achieve perfection in Dhyana, you achieve Siddhis. You can become lighter than the lightest. You can become heavier than the heaviest. You can, if you want something from Mars, you don't have to build a huge rocket and go for days on together. You can just put your hand to the Mars and get stuff from Mars. And you have that perfection. It's not something that's I'm making up, but it's there. So even amongst those dhyana yogis who have achieved perfection with all these siddhis, Krishna says, hardly anyone knows me in truth. So it's Krishna, knowing Krishna is ultimate knowledge. Knowledge of Paramatma and knowledge of Brahman is not the complete knowledge of Krishna. Make sense? Any questions? Yes, Lauren. Please use the mic.
Okay. Like one out of thousands, and then out of all them, hardly one. That's not a very good percentage.
Thank you. Yeah, but here is the beauty though. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, he gave that devotion without asking for any prerequisites. He said, by following the process of devotional service, one can actually get to know Krishna in person. One can establish a relationship with Krishna as one's lover or one's friend or one's son or one's master. So when he came, he gave that access to Krishna. So that is why he is called especially the most magnanimous, because he gave access to Krishna, bypassing all these stages. Otherwise, Krishna said, forget getting me. And when he came as himself, he had a question.
Yes, because Bhagavad Gita, 5,000 years ago, Lord Chaitanya, 500 years
Yes,
ago.
exactly. You got it. Perfect. Because Lord Krishna went back to the spiritual about 5,000 years ago. He said that I asked people to surrender unto me, but actually, unless I show them the path of how to serve me as my own devotee, they can hardly understand. And he came back as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to show by his own example what devotion to Krishna is. And internally he wanted to taste the sweetness of Radharani, of what joy that she was experiencing, what ecstatic joy that she was experiencing when she was serving Krishna, that Krishna himself was missing out. Yeah. So he came as his own consort to taste the love unto himself. And that is the esoteric and extremely beautiful incarnation that is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He came to taste his own devotion. He came to taste his own sweet name. So, and please, purports are really nice purports, because again and again Srila Prabhupada brings to the point that that devotion unto Krishna is the essence of all the Vedic scriptures, and we are taking the direct path. Often devotees are asked, why are you just doing devotion to Krishna? Is there nothing else? What about yogic exercises? What about mind control? What about breath control? What about so many other things that are being asked? But devotion to Krishna is actually the highest goal of life, and that has been directly given. So, okay. Text 4. Okay, you had a question. So both of you had a question. Yes, please go ahead.
One question related to this context of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. So I heard in some Maharaj lecture where Krishna comes only once in one day of Brahma, and it's such an esoteric thing that people can't understand. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who also comes only once in a day of Brahma after Krishna comes, so he comes maybe like 4,500 later or something, so that he can explain the pastimes of Krishna and that we can take advantage of it. So someone was explaining that this is the best time of Kali Yuga to be in, not any Kali Yuga. So is that true, Prabhuji?
Yes, it is true. This is a special Kali Yuga because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to freely give love of Godhead. In every other Kali Yuga, actually the Lord comes, but he comes in a hidden form, and he usually comes as an empowered jiva. Swayam Bhagavan doesn't come. He empowers a jiva to preach the Yuga Dharma for that age. But in this age, Mahaprabhu spoke, thank you, Mahaprabhu came and he spoke the science of devotional service.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Lauren.
Hare Krishna. So, devotional service to Krishna is the highest form of yoga. But, in the survey we've done through all the other forms of yoga that lead up to that point, do you think that there is some place that they have in making someone better able to perform devotional service, or no? Or maybe not?
No, actually, can you please repeat the question? I didn't get it. My apologies.
Oh, no problem. So we were given a survey of the process of yoga that lead up to the highest form of yoga. That it was told to us by Krishna of devotional service to him. Is there a situation where some of the preceding forms of yoga, like this, yogic exercise or meditation, or is there a context within Gaudiya Vaishnavism where those practices help further
Sure.
enable someone to perform devotional service to a greater extent.
Sure. Actually, some of the acharyas, so did everybody get the question? So some of the acharyas have actually used the Yuktahara Viharasya verse in 6th chapter, which is Dhyana Yoga, but where one is regulated in one's habits of eating and sleeping. That has been used as a prerequisite, even in the Bhakti Yoga. Because we are in Bhakti Yoga doesn't mean that we can eat whenever we want or we can sleep how much ever we want. So the acharyas have used that, saying that that can be helpful to Bhakti Yoga. With regards to the breathing exercises, there is not much of emphasis, because when we actually chant the names of Krishna, we are automatically doing that in the form of the sound vibration. But having said that, if someone is actually deeply interested in doing the breathing exercises, there is no harm, because breathing exercises do help control the mind, and if that's a welcome addition. If our chanting remains the same. Okay. So in the second verse, Krishna says, Jnanam teham sa vijnanam, right? Jnanam and vijnanam. Jnanam is knowledge of the material world, and vijnanam is the knowledge of spiritual world. So Krishna first reveals the knowledge of the material world in the 4th verse. Kindly repeat. Bhumirapo nalo vayu khammano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritirashtada.
Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All together, these 8 constitute my separated material energies.
Thank you. So Krishna in one verse talks about material world. He says that these are the 8. This material world is comprised of these 8 things, and these are my separated energies. And that he leaves at that. And then in the next verse, Krishna actually talks more about the spiritual energy. But the Bhagavatam actually takes this one particular verse, and there are 2-3 cantos in Bhagavatam just talking about how the Lord creates. Because in a very simplistic way, Krishna says, these are my 8 energies. But really, from where, how did the energies come about? And how do they interact? Who are the demigods who are in charge of all these energies? And where is Krishna in picture? When he says, my separated energy, does it mean that that energy is existing without Krishna? Or is Krishna within that energy? The whole process of creation and sub-creation is actually there, just to mention in Srimad Bhagavatam. So for those who, when we hopefully do the Bhagavatam studies, then we can get into the depth on the 2nd and 3rd cantos where this is mentioned. Because try to imagine this, that earth, water, fire, air, ether, everybody has the experience, yes or yes. But just think about it, how are they acting so harmoniously? My body is made of earth, there is water in it, 70% of body is water. Air, you breathe in, breathe out. Fire, just obviously, everybody, if you touch the skin, it's obviously hot. I mean, if we are having fever, then it's extraordinarily hot. So the fire is there in the body. And then the space, there is, the body occupies space. This glass occupies certain space in the air. So there is space needed for the glass to exist. If there was no space, there was no way the glass would exist. So there is space. But if you can think about it, it acts perfectly. Our body is constituted of these 5 elements, and then apart from that, intelligence, mind and false ego still exist. But how harmoniously they work, as if, that is, we are all together kind of thing. So that harmony, how Krishna can establish, it's not like everything is happening by random. Random means one day morning you get up and there is no skin, only water, you are in the liquid form. The third day you exist only air. Here there is nothing else because everything is gone. Everything is atom. That's what science loves to say. Everything is just atoms. Everything is atoms. Then why don't you teleport a man from here to India in like 2 minutes? And then disintegrate that atoms, take it to some other place, then assemble it. It's atoms, right? But then just the way they harmoniously act, the way the body is like sustaining, because Krishna is giving that facility to the soul to enjoy this material world, and he has given this body to help with that particular effort. Sorry, I got a little off tangent, but it's pretty much relevant. Next verse. 5th. Kindly repeat after me. Apareyam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat.
Besides this, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature.
Thank you. So Krishna is saying that there is a matter, and there are superior to matter is the living entities who are exploiting the material energy. And then in the next verse, Krishna says, text 6. Srila Prabhupada, actually, you don't have to go back to text 5, but in text 5, Srila Prabhupada says that if the living entities are exploiting the material nature, then Krishna or somebody is put them in that material nature. That superior energy is exploiting the material energy, which means there is some other power that is making them exploit the material energy. If the living entities were equal to God Himself, then who's put me into this material energy? It's hard to logically argue that statement. If I am God, then I can come and I can go out of this material energy as I please. But try as you may, you cannot get out. Which means there is somebody else who put you in here. So time and again, those who use Bhagavad Gita to say that Krishna is impersonal and you are same as God, there are so many statements actually, as in the 7th chapter, we see that really are not logical or they do not conform to that particular theory of monism. Text 6. Yes, Lauren. Please, as many. Doesn't matter. Even if you can't complete this chapter, it's fine.
Were we put here by a superior entity, or did we choose a department?
Okay, I'll repeat the question, Lauren. It's okay, don't worry. So, Lauren's question is, did we choose to be put here, or just some superior energy push here? Right? Is that? That was my question. Yes. It's both. It's both. I'll tell you why. If there was no choice, my choice was not to come here, and I was forcibly pushed into this material world. And obviously only one person can do that is God. Nobody else can push me into this material world. Which means God is not my well-wisher. Krishna says, Suhrudam Sarva Bhutanam. I am the well-wisher of every living entity. And then, really, if you have a very close friend, and then you give him poison and try to kill him and say, I am your well-wisher. Obviously, that goes against the very definition of being a well-wisher. So Krishna did not forcibly put us here. Then, if there was some desire on our part, maybe Krishna facilitated that desire. Though, because otherwise there is no way, logically it doesn't make sense that we have been forced. Because God is not some cruel sadist who just likes to put people into material world and let them suffer for millions and millions of births and takes pleasure in that. Krishna actually takes absolutely no pleasure. In fact, he is so kind, we forget him and we are so bound up in the illusory energy, thinking we are really happy here. Krishna time and again comes here to get us out. But it has to be from us. Our volition is also involved there. And similarly, our coming here also, there is definitely our volition is there. A part is there, maybe directly or maybe indirectly. We didn't say, hey God, put me in this material world. No, maybe it was not like that. Maybe it was very subtle. Maybe we have been in this material world since time immemorial. It's hard to tell. Make sense? Thank you. Excellent question. Text 6. Etadhyonini bhutani sarvanityupadharaya aham kritsnasya jagataha prabhava pralayastata.
All created beings have their source in these two natures. Of all this that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, known for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution.
So here Krishna not only says the material energy, also says the spiritual energy, and he says who is the source. He says that of all that is created, I am the source. From me everything comes. So it's pretty clear there. Text 7. And Krishna, after saying that, this is a beautiful verse. Mattaha parataram nanya kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protam sutre maniganaiva.
There is a common controversy over whether Supreme Absolute...
No, just please read the translation.
O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me, as pearls are strung on a thread.
So here Krishna is saying there is no truth superior to me. Is Krishna speaking in the impersonal, is Arjuna seeing Krishna as an impersonal formless Brahman, or is seeing Krishna as a chariot driver? He is seeing as a chariot driver because Krishna is speaking. All of a sudden, for this verse, Krishna did not assume the impersonal feature and where is he? So the point is, Krishna as a person is saying this statement, there is no truth superior to me. When you say there is no truth superior to me, then how can you ascribe that the absolute impersonal is formless? When absolute impersonal truth in a person in front of you is saying that there is no truth superior to me. Make sense? So the entire purport, Srila Prabhupada discusses that. There's common controversy whether the supreme truth is impersonal or personal. And then Krishna is a person, he's saying that there is no truth superior to me. If impersonal Brahman was the absolute truth, formless, full of light and effulgence and limitless, then Krishna would not make this statement because there is a truth higher than him. Another way Krishna is saying here is that if I am the supreme truth, which means I am not an incarnation that has come for a limited time. If I am an incarnation of God, come here for a limited time, which means I am not the absolute truth. From whom I incarnated, he is the absolute truth. Right? So, very, very clear. Bhagavad Gita is very clear in terms of who God is, and when he asserts his authority, it's very clear on what the form, what the name, how does Krishna look like, how does he behave, who his friends are. Everything is pretty clear. Yes.
I heard in some other scriptures, like Shiva Purana, so in some places where Brahma himself says, I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead or something like that. Similarly, Shiva also says, there is no superior truth beyond me. Is that true, Prabhuji? And if it is true...
Do they assert in... Because the thing is, in those Puranas... Please sit. In those Puranas, I need to know the exact statement. Because they can't... The Lords can't assert that there is no truth superior to me. Only Krishna can make that statement. In what context they made, that's a different thing. Also, it's an interesting thing. The demons, when they praise Lord Brahma, they praise him as if he is the absolute truth. So, is it the words being spoken by the demigods themselves? And what is the context? Because Hiranyakashipu, when he was worshipping Lord Brahma, after 100 years of such severe austerities, when Brahma came, Hiranyakashipu praised as if you are the original creator, you are the God, you are the truth, you are everything. From his perspective, maybe that was true. Because for him, Lord Vishnu was an enemy who should be killed. He was just a killer of his brother. And Brahma, in his warped vision, was the supreme truth. So, whether... I don't know the context, so I can't... what is the context, who was saying it, and so on and so forth. So.
Makes a lot of sense, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Shashi Shekhar, Prabhu.
Prabhu, when Hiranyakashipu is praying to Brahma and doing tapasya, wouldn't he want to know what is the origin of Brahma himself? And then he's trying to kill the person and he's asking for boon from someone who's being created from from Vishnu, and
Well,
why wouldn't he want to know about Brahma when he is worshipping him, and then he knowing, why would he fight with?
That is the demoniac nature, unfortunately. So, thank you for your comment, but we'll leave it at that. The demons are against the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, when we do the next semester, he says that those who are in the mode of worship, those who are in the mode of passion, they worship actually human beings or ghosts or little powerful human beings. And Prabhupada writes in the purport that a man in Calcutta during the time of World War II actually performed Aarti to Hitler. He worshipped Hitler. Because of the war, he had made a lot of money in the black market. So, as much faith, as many varieties of faith, that many types of worship. Anybody who can fulfill my desire is my God. That's it, period. So, yes.
Some people in India keep the picture of Sachin in their quarters actually.
And built temples for actors and actresses. Text 8. So Krishna in the next few verses gives his pervasiveness. Text. Kindly repeat after me. So before we do, Lauren, when we have Y at the end of the word, it's a compound word, so we try to club together. So I know the Sanskrit can be a little tricky there, but thank you for kind of following that. Yeah, when it comes, I'll point out to you. But in this, it seems to be reasonably straight. Rasoham apsu kaunteya prabhashmi shashi suryayoho pranava sarva vedeshu shabdake paurusham nrishu.
O son of Kunti, I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am the sound in ether and ability in man.
So here Krishna is clearly telling his pervasiveness. The thing is, Krishna is saying that he has his material nature, but at the same time he is pervading that material nature. When you see something, for example, as Yashoda Kripa Prabhu was saying, a famous cricketer being placed in the altar in the houses. So if we take Krishna's words, you can say that I am the ability in the man. Unless Krishna has empowered certain person to do extraordinary activities, they cannot do it. So even if you have, as Shashi Shekhar's logic is perfect, if you see, for example, a famous cricketer who has performed astounding deeds, you should ask the question, who is the person who is inspired that same person to perform so many deeds or so many centuries, whatever is the case may be. Why didn't the others do it even though they had the will? So Krishna says, I am the ability in man. And when we see that other devotees or co-workers doing extraordinarily well, then we should realize, that there is certain empowerment by Krishna. We shouldn't be too envious. We should work hard, but at the same time we shouldn't be too envious. It's okay. It's fine. Because the person who is famous, under illusion, he or she thinks that the fame is created by me. I am famous because of my own efforts. But fame is created by Krishna. Right? Text, a few more other verses, just Krishna talks about his pervasiveness. Text 9. Okay. Punyo gandha pritivyam cha tejas chasmi vibhavasau jivanam sarva bhuteshu tapas chasmi tapasvishu.
I am the original fragrance of the earth. I am the heat in fire. I am the life of all that lives. And I am the penances of the ascetics.
Thank you. Can Preeti Sandarbha read the next verse? She didn't get a chance so far. Text 10. Bijam mam sarva bhutanam Viddhi partha sanatanam Buddhir buddhimatam asmi Tejas tejasvinamaham.
O son of Pritha, know that I am the original seed of all existence, the intelligence of the intelligent, and the prowess of all powerful men.
Thank you. Text 11. Balam balavatam chaham kamaraga vivarjitam dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshava.
I am the strength of this throne, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex life which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Paratas, Arjuna.
So, here Krishna says that I am the sex life which is not devoid of religious principles. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that ideally it is for having children. Everything can be used in service of Krishna. And to the extent it is used in service of Krishna, it is not different than Krishna himself. And Krishna is saying even the act of a union between man and woman is something that is divine when it is used for the right purpose. But if there are some societies that allow freely intermingling in the name of divine, but that is not divine. It's just sense gratification in the name of divine. Because there are few societies like that, and it's pretty wrong to use or abuse the statement of Krishna. Oh, Krishna says that, that's okay in Bhagavad Gita, but there are certain restrictions on how you do it. Text 12. Ye chaiva satvika bhava rajasas tamasaschaye matta eveti tan viddhi natvaham teshu te mayi.
Know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me.
So this is a beautiful verse. Before we go, can you just show Yashoda Prabhu, can you just go up a little bit, show me the verse? So for Lawrence's benefit. So if you can see the last line, right? And it is actually the word, it's TV, is actually tu in Sanskrit. Tu means but. And but but. So the tva and aham actually in the original text is combined and it becomes tvaham. Tu plus aham is a compound word. And it becomes tvaham. So natvaham teshu te mayi. So yeah, if you see the original Sanskrit in Devanagari, they'll be shown as one word. But when you split it up, it becomes two words, and the pronunciation can get a little tricky. So I'm just trying to elucidate that. Thank you. Thank you. So the example, there are few examples that we can talk. Krishna says all these energies come from me and they are within me, but I am not within them. It can be a confusing statement. Let me elaborate. A magician pulls off astounding tricks. The audiences gasp and they are in awe and they are entranced and mesmerized by that trick. And they are enveloped in that trick. Is the magician also under the illusion of his own trick? He completely knows perfectly what's happening and he's above the trick. Because he is also in the trick, then nothing will happen. The magic show won't continue. Because, how did I do that? I have no clue. I am amazing. Oh my God, I had no idea I could do that. People will say, you shouldn't be in the magic show, you should be in the mental hospital. Because magician is not under the spell of that trick. Though without him the trick won't run. He is from him the trick is emanating, but he is beyond that. That's one example. The second example is spider. You've seen spider webs, right? And they can be the marvels of nature. Fine, intricate, really dangling across in the space somewhere. I don't know how they could even connect the points together. That spider comes from here to branch, this branch and that branch, and then you see that it's perfectly formed web. But is the spider ever trapped in oh my God, I'm trapped in my own web. And the web actually came from the spider. The spider has the capability, because it doesn't outsource the material or order the material from Amazon to build its own web. The web, the material that is used to build the web is coming from the spider itself. And the spider spews out its own web, constructs this beautiful thing, and it is just the master and owner of its web without falling into the prey into the web. If a simple spider can create its own web and not be caught in that web, why would Krishna, who is the supremely intelligent, create this material nature and fall into the material nature? When his insignificant creation, a spider doesn't have to do that. So this is the same thing. Krishna says, from me the modes come, and everybody is bewildered, but I am not bewildered. I am transcendental to those modes. And here further, Krishna actually goes, and when we go into the few other verses here. Text 13, and that's what he tries to tell. Tribhir gunamayair bhavair Ebhi sarvamidam jagat Mohitam nabhijanati Mamebhya paramavyayam. Lauren, please. Thank you for coming.
Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and exhaustible.
Thank you. So this was just a continuation of the previous verse that we talked about. Right? Yes. Yes, Prabhu.
Lord Krishna himself says that the whole world does not know me. But the whole world also includes devotees in Manushyanam Sahasreshu, out of those thousands of men, because they also are in the same world. So what is Krishna trying to convey exactly here?
Okay, so let's read the purport a little bit, and then we can clarify that. Purport: the whole world is enchanted by the three modes of material nature. Those who are bewildered by these three modes cannot understand that transcendental to this material nature is the Supreme Lord Krishna. Every living entity under the influence of material nature has a particular type of body and a particular type of psychological and biological activities accordingly. So, if you see Yashoda Kripa Prabhu, it is clearly mentioned those who are not bewildered, or those who are bewildered by the modes of material nature, they cannot know Krishna. But those who are not bewildered, and in the next few chapters, Krishna says, because in the 14th chapter, Arjuna asks, who is the person who is above the modes of material nature? And Krishna says, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. So it is specifically targeted those who are deluded by the modes of material nature. Those who are not devotees, but those who are devotees are not included in this category. Because Krishna says that those who are my unalloyed devotees, they are above. So he makes a distinction when we go along. Thank you. Text 14. Kindly repeat. So Lauren, here also if we can see HY is, and then Esha is one word. So it's pronounced as Hesha. Yeah. So yeah, Hesha. Kindly repeat. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mameva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite.
This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it.
So when Krishna says these modes of material nature are difficult to overcome, for us it's impossible. If he says it's difficult, for us it's next to impossible, because the modes are so strong, it's impossible. One example it's often given is that if I take you into Pacific Ocean by plane, into 1,000 miles into Pacific Ocean and then drop you off in the ocean. Of course, I won't kill you, but I'll go low and then drop you off. And then I'll say just swim back to San Francisco. The material world is actually an ocean. It's a vast, infinite ocean. that waves are being tossed up and down. And for a jiva soul, on his or her own power, Krishna says it's impossible to overcome. And those who surrender unto me, but it becomes very easy. And even the demigods say this in the 10th canto. What's that famous verse? Mahat padam yat, mahat padam yat. I don't. No. Padam padam yad vipadam natesham. Anyway, I can't remember that verse on top of my head. Bhavam buddhir vatsa param param padam 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 yad vipadam natesham. Anyway. Thank you. Text 5. And actually Krishna talks in the 15th verse, in the 15th verse, Krishna talks about 5 people. He says those who surrender unto me, they can cross over this ocean of material existence easily. But he tells who are the types of people who don't want to surrender unto me. Text 15. Kindly repeat. Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradhamaha mayaya pahrita jnana asuram bhavamashritah.
Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me.
So here, there are 4 classes of people who it is mentioned do not surrender unto Krishna. The first class is that those who are grossly foolish, mudha. Then they work hard day and night and they just perform certain sense gratificatory activities and they think that is it. I don't want to. And if you are asked to, if you present them with the Bhagavad Gita, they'll say, sorry, I don't have time. Because I have to work so hard. Krishna says, you don't have to work hard. If you surrender unto him, life is easy. Life is free, troublesome. No. I don't have time. I have to work really hard. Okay. The second class is the lowest among mankind. Srila Prabhupada's purport is very nice. Please read that purport. It's really important. You never know. And then those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, maya, pahrita, jnana, and then asurim bhavam. Those who have when you say atheistic nature of demons, you mean there are certain people who stubbornly refuse to believe in supremacy of God. No matter what is the logic, no matter how clear is the logic, no matter how much they are suffering, but there is that innate sense of stubbornness. There is no God. I am the creator of my own destiny. And the problem is that that sense of surrender never comes. But it's a big purport. It's a really nice purport. Please take your time. Srila Prabhupada actually goes into each of the 4 classes and explains in detail about. You can take time to read. It's really good. Yes, Samashritai. Thank you. Which is the verse number? 10, 14, 58. Let's look it up. 10, 14, 58. Yes. Thank you. Kindly repeat after me. Samashhritaye padapallavaplavam Mahat padam punya yasho murare Bhavambudirvatsa padam param padam. Padam padam yadvipadam natesham. Translation: for those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation, and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Mura demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. Their goal is Parampadam, Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, and not the place where there is danger at every step. Actually, growing up in India, my grandfather, he used to live in a village. And there were fields, and he had fields, and the cows and buffaloes which were there in the house, every day morning they would go to the field and they would eat grass, and in the evening they would come back. The calves would be at home because they couldn't walk, and in any case they would be at home. So during winter or rainy season, when I visited my grandfather's house, because it was muddy and you can see the calves would walk and they would make this hoof prints impression on the ground, and you can see the water contained within it was not much. You could easily cross it compared to the Pacific Ocean. So for those who have taken shelter of Krishna, this ocean of material world can become like the water that is contained in the hoof print of a calf. So that's what Krishna is saying. Thank you for Priti Sundar Mataji for bringing that up. Text 16. It's a beautiful purport. I wish we had time to go through in depth. It's worth discussing. But kindly repeat after me. These are 4 types of people who surrender to Krishna. Chaturvida bhajante mam Janah sukritino Arjuna Artho jignasurartharthi Jnani cha bharatarshava.
O best among the Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute.
So who are the 4 types of people? So the Acharyas give 4 examples of 4 kinds of devotees. So the distressed, anybody can guess who is the example? Gajendra. So he was the elephant that was caught in the jaws of crocodile, and he was in a deeply distressed condition and he was crying out for Krishna. So, and then who is the desirer of wealth? Dhruva Maharaj. Thank you. So Dhruva was seeking a kingdom better than that of his grandfather, right? And then the inquisitive, that's a tricky one. Yeah, specifically? Thank you. Yes, Shaunaka Rishi, that is the example. And then the Jnanis are, you're right, Satya Prabhu, is the 4 Kumaras. So that is the examples. So, one point here, after categorizing the Dushkritina or the 4 classes of people who do not surrender to Krishna, what is the 4 classes of people that approach Krishna are called by Krishna as? What he used Dushkritina, Sukritina, means that they are pious people. So, many people approach God with many kinds of desires. Some might approach saying, please give me a good wife or a good husband. Please pass me in the exam. Please give me a lot of wealth. Please make me famous. Please let me have 100 million followers on Facebook. Or whatever. There are so many desires in the material world, and people approach God with so many desires. But Krishna says they are pious people because at least they are approaching me to solve their problems, even though it is material. That is not the ideal standard by any stretch of imagination. To approach God with a motive of getting something is more of doing a business, like it's a business transaction. But nevertheless, Krishna is still so merciful. He doesn't say, hey, what nonsense, this fellow has come me for money, bothering me too much. So go away. No, he says, thank you, at least you came. How can I help you? That Lord is so merciful. He's not saying greedy fellows have come. Chaturvida, what is that? Kama, Krodha, Lobha. Chaturvida Kamis. He didn't say that. Yes, Govind Prabhu.
Prabhu, I had a separate question actually. Can I
Okay.
ask?
Okay. Let me complete the train of thought, then I'll definitely ask you for your question. So Krishna says that at least you have come to me. And then the beauty is that Krishna is not unwilling to give. He will give, but he will give in his own way. Usually people worship demigods because demigods are more business transaction. Don't ask, don't tell policy. Krishna is more of tell me more policy. I mean, you worship the demigods, they will give you money and you will say, okay, thank you, I'll stop my worship, you have given me what you want, we'll see you later. Again, I'm in problems, I'll come back to you. Till then, you be your... Krishna says, no, tell me what's your problem, what is more. Now you have come to me, then, spend time together. And that's what people say, hey, yaar, kahan fas gaya? Maybe let's worship some demigods. It will be easier. But Krishna says there is a problem with that too. In future verses, he is going to point that. But Krishna, he gives, but he gives in such a way that people do not ask again. And he gives the shelter of his lotus feet, even though they don't ask. And that is his merciful nature. So, better to approach Krishna. If you have material desires, Krishna, it's better to approach Krishna. You have to be a pure devotee, and then I have some problems, but I need money. How can I ask God? I should not, ask God, please. He knows. It's not that he doesn't know. If you know, then he's at least honest. You say, okay, at least you are honest, I'll give you. Kardama performed austerities. He was the perfect yogi. His siddhis were so powerful that later in Bhagavatam it is told, house building means not a house in Los Altos for 2-acre land costing $20 million. He built a 7-story castle just out of his mystic power. And that castle was not having $100 million property taxes. It could fly in the sky. The castle had parks. It had lakes. Birds were... That he was able to create his castle from his mystic power. And that could travel anywhere. No refueling charges and no smoke and emissions and this and that and GPS, nothing. Mind said, let's go to Brahmaloka. It went to Brahmaloka. So, this Kardama Muni was such an exalted soul, and he worshipped Krishna, and Vishnu appeared before him. Vishnu asked him, so what do you want? He said, look, I shouldn't be asking you all these things, but you know what, I want a wife. He says, you are the Supreme Lord, I should not ask you all this, but this is where I am. I am truthfully telling what is there in my heart. What did Lord Vishnu say? ये बेकार का आदमी है यार, इतना दूर बुलाया और ये बीवी के लिए मांग रहा है, सबको मिल रहा है बीवी यहाँ पर. Hindi is like, so the thing is, Lord Vishnu didn't condemn him. When Kardama said, I want a wife, Lord Vishnu didn't say, you useless fellow, everybody is getting a wife, why do you call me for a wife? No, Lord Vishnu was so kind, he said, I know you want a wife. In the third day, a prince's father will come and he will offer his daughter to you in marriage, be happy. And the beauty was that Kardama enjoyed life with his wife but never forgot Krishna. When Krishna gives you something, he makes sure that you don't forget him. But the demigods give you something, they'll make sure you forget Krishna. or by nature you will forget Krishna. The demons get so much of boons from demigods, but after they really forgot both the demigods and Krishna also. We don't hear of Ravana daily doing puja for Brahma once he got his boons. He got his boons and he said, okay, bye-bye. I wanted to get something like you, but you are giving me second-hand stuff, but chill, I'll take it, and we can go. Because Brahma said, I want to be like you, no rival. So, anyways. Text 17. And text 16, let's go at text 16. I'll have to, sorry, I can't let that pass. So, having said that, stay there, Anyabhilashita. So, having said that, the ideal standard of devotion is that we serve Krishna for pleasure of Krishna. We serve Krishna so that he gets happiness. And this is the standard. If you know only one verse in your whole life, you don't know anything else, then this is that verse. And the standard of devotion is mentioned here, so we'll wait for the McAfee to do its thing, or let it be killed. McAfee is doing something. No, McAfee is not pure devotion. Huh? I don't know about that, but kindly repeat after me.
Actually doing worship with that round and
Kindly repeat after me. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavritam anukulyena krishnanu Sheelanam bhaktiruttama. Let's read the translation. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. So the aspiration, if you know why you are here, this is one verse that is needed. Nothing else. To come to this stage is not that trivial or easy. And in the fourth semester, when we read Nectar of Devotion, then this particular verse we'll spend 2 or 3 classes, 6 or 7 hours discussing this verse. What is this verse? And why is this so important verse? So, text 17. But Krishna qualifies that amongst all those 4, is there anybody special? And Krishna says, yes, there is someone special amongst those 4. Kindly repeat after me. Tesham jnani nitya yukta eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi jnani notyartham aham sacha mama priyaha.
Of those, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. For I am very dear to him and he is dear to me.
So here in this particular verse, Krishna is actually talking of a relationship. If I am dear to someone and he is dear to me means that there is a definite relationship. What sort of it is the different story, but nevertheless it is. And Krishna says that amongst those who are jnanis, but who are also engaged in devotional service, they are very dear to me and I am dear to them. So it's a qualification, further step. Text 18. And then again he emphasizes, he doesn't again diminish Krishna's words. If you can see, he is so transcendental and pure that he doesn't disqualify even those who approach him with some material motives, right? And here please repeat after me. Udara sarva evaite Jnanitvatmaiva me matam. So it says again TV and Atmaiva, so Tvatmaiva. Jnanitvatmaiva me matam. Astita sahi yuktatma. Mame vanuttamam gatim. Translation, please.
All these devotees undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and the most perfect goal.
Here Krishna doesn't condemn those who are approaching. All are magnanimous souls. He doesn't say that those who only jnanis are dear to me. Later he qualifies, everybody is a magnanimous soul, but those who is a jnani, I have special preference for him because he considers me to be the highest goal. He doesn't consider the money that I am giving to be the highest goal, or the knowledge that I am giving to be the highest goal, or the removing of distress to be. It's me he considers as the highest goal. Yes, Shashi Shekhar Prabhu.
Wouldn't he saying this, who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self? Wouldn't this confuse impersonalist again?
Myself in the sense because he is so much united with me in the thought. It doesn't matter. A husband and wife, for all practical purposes, they are taken as one. Right? They are united in some ways, many ways actually. But they are still two different entities, and there is complete harmony between them, hopefully. Anyways, that's a whole other topic. Yes, Satya Prabhu.
Briefly, can you please describe the difference between Jnani, Jignasur and Jnani, the inquisitive and the one in knowledge?
So the inquisitiveness comes mainly when you have reached the either the impersonal stage or the jhana stage. You want to know who actually God is. You know that there is God, but you really don't have a complete idea. Is God a Brahman? Is he impersonal? Is he personal? Is he Shiva? Who is God? So you are not completely sure. And then because you are not sure, you are inquisitive to know more who God is. In the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Gopakumar goes to Vaikuntha. And because he sees God, or everybody is like God, he starts offering worship to Lord Vishnu, but even though they are gatekeepers of Lord Vishnu, thinking they are to be Lord Vishnu. So, the complete understanding of Krishna is something that is lacking in the inquisitive. They might believe in Vedas, they might believe in Karma Kanda, Upasana Kanda, worship of demigods, but to know who Krishna is in truth, that's it. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is something that it's not easily, to be in study thing. The jnanis are who are in knowledge of the Lord, but those who are engaged in devotional service along with jnana. Because please understand, at this point, we are still not in pure devotional state in Bhagavad Gita. 9th chapter is where we come there. We are still like, modes of material nature, worship, and then, it's going in a transcending path.
Devotees in ISKCON, we more or less fall into the fourth category, jnanis with devotion.
More or less. But if the faith is not strong, if in the beginning stages, if the faith is not strong, hey, why are you guys worshipping Krishna? Shiva is the supreme, or Vishnu is the supreme, or something like that. So then the problem is that faith is not strong, so there is no firmness or dhrida And Krishna says in the towards the end of this chapter, who is a Dridhavrata? You make sense? Okay. Text 19. Kindly repeat after me. Bahunam janmanamante Jnanavan mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvamiti Swamahatma sudurlabha.
After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare.
So here is Krishna is very clear. He's saying that this is a process that doesn't come, overnight. Sometimes those who are in the path of jnana, that'll take a long time. Even amongst ISKCON devotees, Satya Prabhu you mentioned, is that the surrender to Krishna is not happening overnight. It takes a while to be completely surrendered to will of Krishna. It will happen, nevertheless. It's not, nobody is expected to happen overnight. But, in due course of time, in association of devotees, it will happen. Because the false ego is still strong. I am a devotee of Krishna, but am I completely surrendered to Krishna? Am I ready to take the insults of the world? Am I ready to face miserable situations if Krishna so deems necessary for my purification? Or will I give him up saying that, she's too much? So it's a gradual prapadyante, or it's not something easy. Oh God, I surrender unto you. But tomorrow when something happens, I unsurrender. Undo the surrender, I unsurrender. It's becoming, the un is being used pretty common these days for everything. That is not surrender. Everything is favorable, I surrender, and everything unfavorable, then I just make a 180 degree. 20. Kamaistaiste hritagnyana prapadyantenya devata tam tam niyamamastaya prakritya niyata svaya.
Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures.
So here Krishna is very clear. Why do people worship the demigods? Is that they worship according to their own rules. And their nature is such that they are born. That's why in India we'll see so many temples with so many gods and so many rituals and so many ways. And people often fight over like mine is better than yours and my God is more powerful than yours, though neither of them has seen their God fight. I mean, how do you know? At least my God should fight with your God and one should defeat and then we logically accept. No. Because the idea, I'm being humorous, but the fact of the matter is faith is such that you place your faith in certain God and then you worship accordingly. So, but Krishna says that if usually the intelligence, somehow you are so desperate to get stuff in the material world, you are willing to forego the fact that God is God, but and then you forget that anybody is God as long as my desires are fulfilled. Somehow or other. That's why people get cheated with astrology, with yantra stones, with this homam and that prayaschita, this vastu. To an extent, these are all sciences. Please don't get me wrong. But to place your entire faith in that science as the cause of all happiness and removal of all distress, therein lies the problem. Because the faith should be ultimately placed in Krishna. And Krishna says why in the next verse. If we go to next verse, we can find out why. Text 21, not next verse, but the verse after next. Anyways. Yo yam tanum bhakta श्रद्धयार्चितुमिच्छति तस्य तस्य चलां श्रद्धां तामेवा विददाम्यहम्. Govind Prabhu, did you get to read? So you're okay? Okay. All right. Preeti Sundar Mataji, you can start.
I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity.
God is bahut chalu. It means God is very tricky. If I faith my place in the demigod, why is he making my faith stronger in the demigod? He should actually say, no, you should not. I'm going to make my faith stronger in me only. But he is making faith stronger in the demigod, means he is not doing the right thing. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport. If you come down a little bit. Some may ask, where the cursor is, exactly, yeah. Some may ask why the all-powerful God gives facilities to the living entities for enjoying this material world and so lets them fall into the trap of illusory energy. The answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Super Soul does not give such facilities, there is no meaning to independence. Therefore, he gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes, but his ultimate instruction we find in Bhagavad Gita. One should give up all other engagements and fully surrender unto him. That will make man happy. So, one example I give is, most of us have children, right? They see their father is driving a car, BMW car, or any Mercedes, whatever. And the child says to the father, he's all of 7, 8 years old, whatever, I want to drive like you. No, impossible. How can you drive a car like me? No, I want to drive like you. We can't do that. Again and again he pesters. What does the father do? He'll go to the toy shop and get a small toy car and say, okay, take it, enjoy. But the fact of the matter is that father doesn't completely destroy the independent or the independence to drive a car, but he gives facilities like that. After some time the child is bored of the car because the car either is broken or he banged it into a wall or banged it into his grandmother, whatever be the case, I hope not. But Krishna, according to the will of the soul, gives independence to the jiva to do what the jiva wants, the heart, wherever it is there, Krishna says, I'll help. In fact, so Krishna is helping rather than hurting. It is for us to purify and to say, I don't want all this, I just want to, if the child is intelligent, he'll say, I don't want all these cars, I want to drive with you. It's more safer bet. So, similarly, if the soul says to Krishna that, I want to surrender unto you and I want to serve you, then God will give you that facility. But as long as we're saying, I am independent, I want like you, then God is saying, okay, please come here and take the toy BMW and just these. Because rich people actually say they have toys. They have big yachts and airplanes and cars and houses and whatever. And they, boats, yachts, boats, ships, and they say they are toys. So God gives the toys so that you can play with your toys. It's the same thing. Just it costs more and maintains more. It's more headaches, but that's about it. Text 22. Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas Tasya Radhanamihate Labate cha tata kaman Mayaiva vihitan hitan.
Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone.
Thank you. So Krishna is clear saying that even though the demigods give the fruits, it is me ultimately who awards them. And then text 23. There is this notion, why Krishna? Why not worship Shiva? Why not worship others? You'll still go back to Krishna. You worship Shiva, but you go back to Krishna. What's the difference? Because they are one and the same. Whether you please the husband or the wife, they are one and the same. So you are pleasing either. But we'll see. Text 23. Antavattu phalam tesham tadbhavatyalpamedasam devan devayajo yanti madbhakta yanti mamapi.
Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet.
Thank you. Because this material creation is created by Krishna, and the demigods are part of the material creation, as long as the material creation exists, the demigods can give. For example, if you go to a friend's house and you want to stay with that friend, and that friend is living in the rented house, so you can stay in that house as long as the landlord allows. If the landlord evicts your friend, then by default, you know what's going to happen. But here Krishna he's saying, Bhoktaram Yajna Sapsam. I am the controller and owner of everything that is. So the demigods' planetary systems, you can go, but you'll stay there for a limited time. Text 24. Avyaktim yaktimapannam manyante mam abuddhayaha param bhavam ajananto mama avyayam anuttamam.
Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme.
So it's supremely clear whether Krishna is personal or impersonal. He says that men of small intelligence, people who do not know me in truth, think that I was impersonal. Now I have become a person, and then I will be impersonal when I don't see you. But Krishna is clearly saying that my superior nature is such, even though I am standing before you. This is the beauty of Krishna's. When we do Janmashtami, when we celebrate Janmashtami, where the appearance of Krishna happens, what is so special about it? The reason it is so special is that all-powerful, invisible, and completely transcendental Supreme Personality of Godhead is becoming manifest in front of our eyes. That we can see Him, and then He can perform His activities for the entire auspiciousness of this world. And that's why it's such a big event for Janmashtami, where we remember the Lord's munificent nature. Otherwise, why would He come? If you are like a CEO of a company enjoying life and everything is going on well, you are asked to go, you have to go to prison and help out the prisoners a bit. So, why waste time here? I'm happy here. But that was His compassion that He comes and He does that. So, text 25. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrita mudoyam nabhijanati loko mamajam avyayam.
I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible.
Thank you. Text 26. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani cha Arjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kaschana.
O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows.
Thank you. Text 27. Yes.
In previous verses, he mentioned that I am within everyone and I am the supreme, and now he's saying nobody knows me. So, like, what's the context?
We watch a movie, right? You see the actors, you see both male and female actors, we see the settings, we see the action, we see the emotions, we see the villains. But do you see the director? Without the director, will that movie be possible? So similarly, you say, oh, what a wonderful acting, this and that. But the fact of the matter is, the director is easily missed as the part of movie-going experience. So similarly, Krishna says that, you can see everything and you can see the things that are created by me, but who is that source, nobody knows. In fact, because he says that Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha, that Krishna is the cause, that person is very rare. That's why Krishna says, me no one knows. That when you say no one knows, in truth no one knows. You can give a vague idea, universe, God, creator, intelligent design, something vaguely you can tell, but what is the truth, no one knows. Govind Prabhu, you had a question. Yes, please go ahead. The previous question also you had. My apologies, I didn't call.
Just thinking about that verse. Maya Javanika Chandam.
Nice.
Okay. So that's
Maya Javanika Achandam Agnya Adhokshajam Avyayam Nalaksha se Mudhadrisha Nato Natya Dharoyata. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for bringing up that verse. It is in the context to the 25th verse that Govind Prabhu is mentioning. Thank you. Text 27. We'll do 27 and 28, and then we can take more questions later if you want to. Ichchadvesha samuthena dvandvamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa.
O sign of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities, arisen from desire and hate.
Thank you. Text 28. Esham tvantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dridhavrataha.
Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination.
Thank you. Text 29. Jara marana mokshaya mam ashritya yatantiye te brahma tadvido kritsnam adhyatmam karma chakhilam.
Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities.
Thank you. Next verse. Sadi bhutadi daivam mam Sadi yajnam cha ye vidu Prayana kale pichamam Te vidur yukta chetasa.
Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to the governing principles of the me, material manifestation of the demigods, and all of methods of sacrifice can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, even at the time of death.
Thank you. So, here Krishna in the last verse, he gives many things. He is the governing principle, Sadi Bhutadi Daivamam, and he is the original God. And so many things are mentioned here in the 30th verse, which form the basis for the next chapter. And because Krishna ends with the chapter saying that I am the controller, and from me everything emanates. Those who in full consciousness of me know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of material manifestation of the demigods and of all the methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of God, even at the time of death. So here Krishna unpacks his nature in so many ways, that he is the governing principle, he is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, he is the controller of all demigods. The demigods come into picture for the first time. He is the controller of all the demigods, and then they can know me at the time of death. So 8th chapter, actually Krishna, Arjuna asks those questions. Who is this Adibhuta? Who is Adidaiva? Who is Yadi Yajna? And how can one remember you at the time of death? So 8th chapter is pretty much that. At the time of how the person quits his body and how one can remember Krishna at the time of death, and how what devotion is. So next week, is that okay? Same time, or you want in the morning? Same time? All right. We'll meet. Lauren, yes. Yes. As long as Vaisheshika Prabhu has not come, then he's here. He's there outside? He's in a meeting? Okay. Please let me know. Yes, go ahead, Lauren.
So verse 24, the translation, unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. So my question about that verse is just like, what's the term for the different ways that you can relate with Krishna? What's the term for that? It's like
Rasa?
Yeah.
Or relationship.
Ras Leela. So this verse is saying that that Krishna they falsely believe that Krishna was impersonal before, now he's assumed this personality. And I know, like for Ras Leela, you don't you're always relating to a person, but the form in which the person that you relate to is not the same for all jivas, right? So.
Yes. So if I understand you right, many jivas have of different forms of the Lord that they are attracted to. And their service to the Lord is also different based on the forms they are attracted to. That is true.
And that he will facilitate that relationship. So,
As we
it's like he has a personality, but he can assume different forms. Right?
No, he has already different forms, and the devotees, when they advance in spiritual life, uncover a particular form of the Lord and uncover their relationship with that form. For example, Hanuman was attracted to Lord Ram, and Lord Ram was everything to him. In fact, he was tested in other incarnations to deviate from worship of Lord Ram. He said, "No, I cannot give up my Lord Ram. That's who my Lord is, and I can't bear to worship anyone else. And the only way I can relate to Lord Ram is that I am a servant of Lord Ram. He is my eternal master, I am his eternal servant." So as we advance in spiritual life, we get attracted to a particular form of Krishna, whether it be Narsimha, Ram, or some other forms, and then take up service in that relationship. And the soul is completely satisfied in that perfection of that relationship. Is that okay? Thank you.
Make an announcement?
Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. So 2 announcements. One is, if you are parked in the parking lot, please take your car out. On Sundays from 3 o'clock onwards, parking inside the parking lot in the temple premises in the parking lot is not allowed. So please take your car out. The second one is about Bhakti Shastri homework. So 2 assignments you guys have submitted, and the third one will be sent hopefully this week, which will be due on the final day of the exam. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.